Hello, hi everyone. Welcome to Bold Strokes Books' brand new event, BSB Preview. This is where you will get a sneak peek, a tease, a preview of our next month's releases. So these will be authors reading from their July releases. We do have Dena Blake hopefully jumping in here at some point. But just while we're waiting for everyone to filter in before we start officially, I thought I would ask these guys what their quarantine hobby is, just while we wait. So why don't we start with Carsen Taite?
Making cocktails.
I love that.
That's a big thumbs up.
Squeezing limes, mixing various things. But yeah, that's kind of a standard hobby, but I've gotten more into it because can't go out and get them. So
So it's been a really fun quarantine for you.
yes, definitely.
Yeah, that's cool.
I have this is water.
What about you, Jensen? What's your quarantine hobby?
I mean, other than existential dread, I think I've been growing my own food. You know, I've learned I have a container garden going, and we have some hydroponic growth going on here, growing all my greens and tomatoes and stuff.
That's very cool.
Yeah.
That's really useful too. Two useful hobbies.
Exactly, yeah. They work together, I think. They go hand in hand.
Yeah. Between the two of you, we have a full meal. I like it. Jane Fletcher, what's your quarantine hobby?
Redecorating or redoing the landscaping the garden. We've been shoveling gravel, putting in a small water feature, lawns, hacking down things.
Yeah, you guys are so productive. All right. So
well, I'm sitting around drinking, but they're
so we're all going to Jane's house to sit in her garden.
That's right.
Carson's bringing the drinks. Jen's bringing the vegetables. Oh, here's Dena Blake.
Hey, Dena.
Allie, what's your quarantine hobby?
I love to garden all the time, but I actually planted a garden where I planted a bunch of tomatoes. I'm not really sure why. I don't like tomatoes at all. So I've been making nice with the neighbors and with my staff. But like Carsen, last weekend I had my first whiskey sour since I was in college.
Ah.
Have y'all tried that lately? It's really good. And I've learned how to make a really mean old fashioned. So cocktail making and gardening.
There you go. We're a good time at BSB. Dena, your microphone is not. There we go. We're talking about what is your quarantine hobby?
Well, I don't know if there's a hobby, but so far I've tried to plant the garden 3 times, and there's something that always keeps me from doing it. So I water the plants out on the back porch, and hopefully this weekend they get planted. So, yeah.
I feel like I should plant.
I know you should. Maybe.
I think you bought the plants. You're watering the plants. That would be good enough for me. You know, if you want to plant them.
Oh, so why bother to plant?
And something medicinal, Carsen, so that goes with all your cocktails.
Exactly.
Alrighty, so just to recap, we have Allie Vali, Jane Fletcher, Jen Jensen, Carsen Taite, and Dena Blake. And this is BSB Preview, which is readings from our July 2020 releases. So all these lovely authors have prepared a reading for you. And we are going to start with Dena, if you wouldn't mind. So Dena, why don't you introduce your book, tell us the title, the genre, and a little bit about it, and then you can start your reading.
Okay, I'm going to read from Kiss Me Every Day. Can you see that? It's kind of it's a contemporary Dog Day book. There's a scene in Wynn's point of view where she's having dinner with Carly before the loop starts, and she realizes that she made a mistake by letting Carly go and let her sister romance her instead.
Go for it.
All right. Carly blotted her lips with her napkin and flopped back into her chair. What happened to you anyway? What do you mean? She was honestly confused. This conversation had gone in so many directions and wasn't at all what she'd expected tonight. I felt something with you back then when we kissed, and I thought you felt it too. She took a sip of wine. But then you seemed to be so aloof and disinterested. Carly's eyes were focused on her, and she wasn't sure how to respond. A laugh escaped her lips before she could stop it. I'm sorry, I don't mean to laugh. It's just bad karma. I thought we had something going too, but before you got together with Jordan. She waited for Carly to speak. Yeah, we definitely had a vibe between us. I thought you were going to ask me out. And then when your sister came into the picture, you totally backed off. She was stunned. Why hadn't you said anything then? I thought you wanted that. If you didn't, why did you go out with her? A rush of heat filled her. Why did you marry her? The chair rattled as Carly moved forward and planted her elbows on the table. I just told you why I married her. Why'd you disappear? I got the message loud and clear. That night after the fundraiser, you went home with Jordan. I did not go home with Jordan. She gave me a ride. That's it. It wouldn't be the first time Jordan had done that to get something she wanted. It appears so. She lied. I found that she's very good at that. Jordan came to me that night afterwards and said she thought you were the one, her soulmate. It seemed now that everything Jordan had told her in the days following had been lies to get her away from Carly. She hadn't considered that possibility. That's a joke. Then why did you marry her? Your sister was persistent and you were gone. About that, again, where the hell did you go? After what she'd said, I didn't think I had a chance. You seemed interested in her as well. I swallowed my pride, called you so many times, more than I'd ever done with anyone else in my life, and you ignored me. She's my sister. I didn't think she'd lie to you? So instead of talking to me, you just stepped aside and disappeared from my life. I felt I should. Those are some weirdly archaic rules you live by, my dear. If you're so unhappy, why don't you ask Jordan for a divorce? I can't. It's done. And good or bad, I'm married for the rest of my life. What? Now who's living by the weirdly archaic rules? I'm a marriage counselor, one of the most prominent in San Francisco. I'd be a total failure if I couldn't save my own marriage. Everyone in my crucify me. That's ridiculous. Carly stared across the table at her. I don't think I would have liked being the object of the competition between you two, but I would have at least liked to have known you how you felt and given a choice. Would you have chosen differently? Wynn knew she shouldn't ask, but she needed to know. Possibly. Hell yes, it would have been different. Jordan can be very charming when she wants something. She'd seen her in action many times. Not that charming. So she didn't try to persuade you to sleep with her that night? She glanced up as a server appeared out of nowhere and slipped the bill onto the table. Oh, she tried. But my mind was still completely stuck on the kiss you and I had shared on the pier. Her stomach dipped as she remembered the feel of Carly's body against hers that night. Really? She heard the insecurity seep from her voice. It had been a long time since that had happened. Really? You didn't give me much credit, did you? I just thought that I had an off-the-charts kiss with you and then slept with your sister the same night? Carly swiped her mouth with her napkin and tossed it onto the table. You know, Susanna is the only one of the Jameson sisters worth marrying. Unfortunately, she's straight. The chair scraped against the floor as she got up and then practically ran across the restaurant toward the bathroom. That's that.
Awesome. Thank you, Dena. Well, that's Kiss Me Every Day. It's available on the Bold Strokes book site for pre-order right now. And next up, we have Jane Fletcher.
Okay. I'm going to be reading from Silver Ravens. In the story, my main character is called Laurie, and her life's going very badly. And among her problems, she's recently become unemployed. She's got time on her hands, and so plays with some puzzles in a magazine, from which she ends up with a set of embedded instructions, namely to walk 3 times anti-clockwise around an old standing stone in a churchyard. And she suspects it's all a joke, but she's got nothing left to lose, so she decides to try it out, which is where this extract starts. And the novel, you might guess, is fantasy. But anyway, even though it starts modern-day London. The finger of granite stood alone in a corner. The grass around it was clear of gravestones. As Laurie drew closer, a feeling of strangeness grew. A chill breeze carried a wisp of mist past her face. The stone was old, very old. The weight of centuries hung heavily on it. The rustle of the yew trees sounded like murmurs of a long-forgotten language, and she could not shake the idea that the menhir knew she was there. Laurie reached out, brushing her hand over the stone. Nothing other than time and the elements had sculptured the rough faces. Another wisp of mist coiled around her fingers. Was it her imagination? The hair rose on her neck. She would have backed away, but a peal of bells rang out, harsh and loud, jerking her back to reality. It was midday. Laurie straightened her shoulders. Time to forget the whimsical nonsense about sentient stones and talking trees. She would do what she came for, and then when nothing happened, she would walk away, thankful nobody was around to laugh at her. The mist thickened and the temperature dropped a few degrees as she completed the first circuit. The abruptness of its onset was startling. One more thing to chunk up to climate change. The weather forecast had made no mention of it that morning. The hems of her trousers flapped wet around her ankles, picking up moisture from the grass. Another anti-clockwise circuit while still the church bells chimed. The mist turned to dense fog. Now she could no longer see the church. Laurie pulled her raincoat tight at her neck and hurried to finish the final circle. The echoes of the last chime faded away as she returned to her starting point. She had done it, so what now? Laurie peered into the fog, hoping for a figure to emerge. Was anyone there? The conditions made it impossible for an observer to have seen her complete the circuits, but surely whoever it was would take the weather into account. Meanwhile, the fog was lifting, although not as quickly as it had arrived. St. Benedict's Church was a dim shape, seeming smaller and more distant than before. Still nobody came. It was all a joke after all. Time to return to her car and go in search of lunch. Laurie clenched her teeth to bite back a selection of obscenities. The prankster should have picked the 1st of April for the hoax. Before leaving the graveyard, she looked back one last time, then pushed the gate open. Directly opposite the church, no more than a dozen steps away, a pub sign hung outside a rustic building. Laurie stared at it. Why had she not spotted the pub before? She was normally more observant, although admittedly on her arrival she'd been rather distracted. Hopefully the pub would do food. If the sudden change in weather had caused an accident, driving down to Devon might take hours. Even an orange juice and a packet of cheese and onion crisps would hold her over and give the fog a chance to lift. A breeze sprung up, tearing holes in the mist. Seen more clearly, the outside of the pub did not inspire confidence. Forget the rustic bit, decrepit was a better word. On second thought, did she really want to go in? But the smell of wood smoke cast a deciding vote. An open fire was unusual in May, but the weather definitely warranted it. The chill had etched through to her bones. As Laurie approached the door, creaks from the swaying sign made her look up. The picture was weathered away, but the words were just legible. The halfway house. Of course, the last part of the instructions. Maybe it was not a joke after all. Whoever set the puzzles might be inside. Laurie's stomach tightened. The moment had come to discover whether she had been played as a fool. Laurie pushed open the door.
Oh no, what happens next? You can't stop there. Thanks, Jane.
I had my coffee. There we go.
So you have to buy the book to find out. Just so everyone knows, I am posting the links to these books in the chat roll, so you can just click on the link if you're interested in the book. There's also a special message in the chat roll just for you guys. All right, Jensen, tell us about your book.
Sure. So can you see it through the TARDIS? There we go. All right. The Politics of Love. So I think that when I was inspired to write this book, I wondered, is it possible for a Democrat and a Republican to date or fall in love during these intensely polarized times? And I think the book gave me an opportunity to just kind of think through some of the more toxic aspects of our current political and social climate, and it let me meditate on it. So my two main characters, one is a transgender rights activist, and the other one is a evangelical Christian, or grew up in an evangelical Christian family, Shelley and Rand. So I am actually going to read a section that's from the kind of back of the book. Shelley is the MC, in a sense, in this one. and she's with her brother. She's just come home to Atlanta, and they're attending to some very sad family business. So here it is. Her oldest brother, Asher, waited at curbside pickup. There was a text from him when she powered up the phone after the plane landed. There were many others, but she was saddened not to see one from Rand. Rachel and Jamie both texted and asked for the address to send flowers. She sent it quickly, tucking away her disappointment at not hearing from Rand. She tossed her bag into the trunk of his car and unbuckled her seatbelt as he pulled away from the curb, silent. They'd not spoken since the fall before, and not at all since she published her article. How are Mom and Dad? Shelley broke the silence. She counted light poles as they drove. As expected, he said. He'd not looked at her. Asher, Shelley said, I know it's been a while since we've talked. I'm sorry for that. Just don't make this any harder on our parents, he said. You've already done enough. All I did was be honest about who I am, Shelley said. And break their hearts, all of us. You betrayed us, Asher said. That's ridiculous, and you know it, Shelley said. I agonized over this decision. I spent months in therapy. It was so hard. I knew you'd all view it that way, but it's not what it was to me. That's liberalism for you. Everything is about worship of the self, individualism. You do you. Psychology makes us all selfish. We justify carnal desires by talking about self-truth and identity we like to think is subject to change. Shelley sighed and rested her chin in her hand. She'd counted almost 300 light poles and decided to give it up. I don't want to argue. How is it possible for us to move forward together as brother and sister, especially given what's happened, Shelley said. You can repent, Asher said. This is why America is so divided, Shelley said. How can we move forward together if one side truly believes we're an abomination and won't give? Do you have any idea how damaging that is, to tell me to repent, how much it hurts? Asher didn't respond. His certainty felt as fixed as Rand's, who still had not texted her back. They drove in silence. Shelley was done trying to justify her existence and beliefs. She was done trying to get others to understand how it was possible to be gay and believe in small government, personal liberty, and God. She wasn't going to chase after Rand any longer. Life ended. Noah was dead. She was aging. Her parents were aging. Rand's partner died. Everyone and everything alive would die one day. Despite this, humans found ways to fight and alienate each other, caught up in the power of their rationalizations to avoid their finitude. Modern tribes clashed, powered by ancient DNA that kept early Homo sapiens safe from the other. In the other, we saw ourselves and were afraid, host and hostile. Caught between a desire to welcome the other and destroy the other, humans struggled to compartmentalize the noisy confusion of a changing, connected world. They projected their worst fears on one another. Asher stopped at the stoplight and put both hands on the wheel, 12 and 3 o'clock. Shelley, he said, I don't know how to handle any of this. Shelley unbuckled her seatbelt and hugged him. She held his hand on her shoulder, remembered summers at the lake house chasing through the woods together, saw the stones he skipped across the water, and thought that love should be enough, but it never was. He grabbed her arm with his big hand and cried with her until the sound of a car horn behind them gave him no choice but to move.
Thank you. I feel like that's so relevant for today's climate.
Right. I think so.
And you wrote that, you know, it takes a few months for the books to get through the production process and for them to come out. So you weren't writing that book amid the climate we have now, but it feels like you were. It feels really relevant to write exactly now.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. All right. I don't know. You two gonna duel it out? See who goes first? Carsen, Taite, Vali?
Well, I'm seeing. I forgot my Alley Valley T-shirt is in the dirty clothes.
And then I guess it's Carsen, Taite.
Yeah. Hey.
Tell us a little bit about the book, about your part in it, and your reading.
So this is the book. It's called Still Not Over You, and as you can see, frame Allie, which I'm the filling to the. It's a collection of novellas, a collection of second chance novellas, and about people who are still not over an ex and a chance to reconnect. And my story is Double Jeopardy. It's a contemporary romance. And I'm going to read from the very first opening scene, but I'll just give you a taste from the blurb. Katie James didn't plan on being a runaway bride twice, but when the gorgeous, accomplished former love of her life, Emma Reed, reappears in the week of her wedding, will Katie risk everything for another chance with a woman who might be her soulmate? So I'm going to read the opening scene from the story, and here we go. Today was supposed to be all about filling out forms to solidify a business arrangement, carefully planned and completely sterile in its efficiency. Today was not supposed to hold any surprises, but the one standing not 6 feet away was massive, monumental, and mind-blowing. I'd been here before. Well, not here, actually, but in another courthouse, waiting in line at the clerk's office, forms in hand, ready to file the papers to obtain a marriage license. Not with the woman who is holding my hand right now, but with the one who is standing 6 feet away, Emma Reed, who was seemingly unaware I still existed. And right now, I kind of wished I didn't. Are you okay? I tore my gaze from Emma and back to Ann Cohen, the woman I was supposed to marry in less than a week. I'm good. Yes. Why? Because you seem a little distracted. Anne gave me one of those condescending smiles I'm sure she thought was endearing, but which made me want to hurl. Not an ideal reaction to your future wife. I squelched my annoyance and smiled brightly back. No, all good here. I turned as I spoke to keep from drawing attention, praying Emma would finish whatever she was doing and leave before she spotted me. A second later, I heard a familiar voice and knew my plan had failed. Hi, Katie. It's been a long time. Well, it had definitely been a long time. 8 years to the month. I cast a quick glance at Anne, who was watching the two of us with the same penetrating stare she used in the boardroom, and I hoped to keep this reunion simple and quick, despite the fact that Emma was even more good-looking than I remembered. I pushed past the guarded expression she wore and thrust out my hand like we were mere acquaintances instead of almost marrieds. Hello, Emma. It's good to see you. I turned to Anne. Emma is an old friend. Emma, meet Anne, my fiancée. I was so busy interjecting distance and formality into the introduction, I wasn't quite sure if I'd seen Emma wince slightly at the word fiancé, but I was pretty sure she had. I'd considered trying to make it out of the situation without saying the F word, but I knew Anne's predilection for telling everyone we encountered about our engagement, and Emma deserved to hear the news directly from me, since I was to blame for any wedding PTSD she might have. Which begged the question of what she was doing here, ostensibly alone. But before I could ask, Anne took over. She stuck out her hand. Good to meet you. You must be a friend from Katie's past. She hasn't mentioned you before. Are you here to get a license too? She glanced around as if she could spot a fiancé wandering around looking for a mate. Emma's eyebrows narrowed in confusion. License? She glanced at the sign above the clerk's window. Oh no, I'm here researching a deed for a client. Realtor? Lawyer. Ah. Anne's tone had gone finally curious to total approval, and I recognized the shift for the snobbery it was. But even I had trouble hiding my surprise at the revelation. You went to law school, I asked? Emma's attention shifted back to me, and the heat of it swept me time. I did. I'm working at a firm downtown. Have been for a few months now. While Anne chatted Emma up more now that she'd found a reason to find her interesting, I digested the information that Emma had moved on with her life, with no residual ill effects from our last encounter. I knew I should be grateful. Right now we're a swirled up mix of relief and regret, neither one sitting well on my already roiling stomach. I tuned back in to hear Anne say, we should all get together for dinner. In addition to our impending nuptials, Kate and I have mutual business interests that could benefit from outside counsel. I hated when she used the word nuptials, but I refrained from shaking in frustration lest Emma witness my annoyance. I convinced myself that pretending to be happy would eventually lead to the real thing, and I wasn't ready to let go of that particular belief. But the idea of sitting through dinner with my former love of my life and Anne was more than I could bear. Honey, I'm sure Emma's very busy, and so are we. Too busy to catch up with an old friend? Emma's smile told me she sensed there was more to the story. Nonsense. Coffee then, I said, thinking quickly. The confrontation was going to happen, but I'd be damned if it was going to happen in front of Anne. You and I can catch up on old times, then we'll schedule a real appointment with you after the wedding. Coffee would be perfect. Emma handed me her card. My cell's on here. I look forward to hearing from you. She shook Anne's hand and walked away. How do you know her? I heard the slight edge beneath Anne's friendly tone. I had to give her something or she'd tunnel through my privacy to get answers. We were in college together at Richards. I haven't seen her in years. At that moment, the clerk called our names. For a second, I stood frozen in place, wondering when my life had got so completely out of hand. When I was sure Anne wasn't looking, I glanced back toward the exit, wishing Emma would reappear and my failed past could be rewritten. But I knew, as surely as I'd known then, that fate. I stepped up beside Anne and swore to the clerk that all the information on the forms was correct, and off silent prayer that this was not another one of those mistakes.
Thank you, Carsen Tate. But like, why is she with Anne and not Emma?
Well, I think that you have to go to this chat roll and click on that link and pre-order this book and buy it.
Come on, Emma's obviously a much better match for her. And what
you would think so, right?
I stayed up until 3 in the morning reading that story, so it's good.
There we go. An endorsement from Alley Valley, you guys.
Love me some Alley Valley endorsement.
All right, Alley Valley is up next. Just for everyone listening, please put your questions for our lovely authors in the Q&A box. Because after Alley is finished reading, if we have any time left, because Alley tends to go over, just kidding.
It's 4 minutes and 50 seconds. I will have.
Oh, she.
Synchronize your watches.
Please put your questions in the Q&A box so we can ask these guys. Alley Valley, let's hear your novella from Still Not Over You.
Right. Mine is about a whiskey distiller, Preston Maxwell, who still has no idea why her college sweetheart, Haley Wyatt, has disappeared from her life right after collecting her diploma. But when Haley shows up to work on an advertising campaign that will take her business to the next level, Preston isn't letting her get away a second time. So this is when they first see each other again after an 8-year absence, and Max really doesn't have any idea why, or Preston doesn't have any idea why Haley has left. So she's with her, Max is with her assistant, Roger. Who's next? The Wyatt and Simon firm, Roger said. Preston Maxwell Sinclair wasn't looking up from her paperwork. She hadn't heard the name in years, but it did cross her mind every couple of days. Haley Wyatt, the one memorable girl in her past who had rooted herself in her memories like a stubborn, unwanted weed. Why hadn't anyone told her that your first love was the same as a measuring tape, that you spent the rest of your life comparing and measuring everyone who came after against them seemed to be a rule. Maybe it was only her. Her first love had been perfect before she'd fucked her in the head and broken her heart as effectively as if the girl had used a ball-peen hammer. You okay? Roger stood there while she dug herself out of the black hole that the name Wyatt had dropped her into. She'd long ago accepted that they'd had that 1 year and there'd be no more, but no closure still bothered her. That Haley had walked away meant she really was oblivious as to who she was, or knew and didn't give a good goddamn. I'm fine. Let's not keep them waiting. Let them wait. The Wyatt and Simon firm is well-rounded. No experience with alcohol, but enough serious campaigns to make me think they'd understand the business and do it justice. She nodded. Did you line up anyone with experience? I didn't, but I can add some if you've changed your mind. No, I'd rather start with a firm with no preconceptions about something most people think is a simple drink. Most of the imbibing public thinks there's no finesse in whiskey, unlike wine, and I'm planning to show them otherwise. I love it when you talk fancy, Roger said and shivered. Ready? I'm guessing my answer should be yes for the rest of the afternoon, no matter what. She winked. I'm kidding. I know how important this is. For what it's worth, you really look good in that suit, and your hair is to die for. I should come up with projects like this all the time and fantasize about you being a man. It's your one flaw in life. You're a riot. Let's get going. She glanced down, knowing it would take a few minutes for Roger to get through the introductions. Then her door opened, and she lifted her head, and she started to stand and button her jacket. The sight of the people who entered stopped her cold, and she sucked in a breath and held it. Haley Wyatt. The 8 years since she'd seen her last seemed like an eternity, but this sexy, put-together woman brought her back to her senior year at Tulane in a blink, and she was pissed at herself for giving a shit. It was obviously Haley hadn't had no second thoughts about leaving her for better things, which was acceptable. How Haley had done it was not. Max? Haley appeared confused as she said her name slowly. Miss Wyatt and Miss Simon, I'd like to introduce you to Preston Sinclair, Roger said, seeming as confused as Haley. Max, what are you doing here? Haley's voice sounded as if it couldn't get any louder than the breathy whisper she was using, and her feet seemed nailed to the floor. Making whiskey and looking for a new advertising firm. There was no way in hell she was going to show any kind of emotional response in front of this woman. Have a seat and we'll get started. Thank you for inviting us, the woman with Haley said. Preston hadn't caught her name after seeing Haley. I'm Josie Simon, and we look forward to showing you our presentation. We'd like to explain our company before you start, she said and sat. It was bizarre, but for the first time in her life, she wanted to run and not look back. Hell, Haley had done it, and it seemed to have worked for her. Sinclair is a family business, and we're proud of the product that we have out on the market. In the coming months, though, we'd like to put something new out that will be debuting at the World Whiskey Competition. Are we meeting with Dale Sinclair today? Josie asked, talking over her, since Haley still appeared shell-shocked. We'd like his input on what we have before we change the trajectory of the campaign we have in mind. Preston stared at Josie, but she couldn't form words. Mr. Sinclair won't be available for these initial meetings, but you're free to wait, Roger said, jumping in. Mr. and Mrs. Sinclair will be hosting a cocktail hour tomorrow night to introduce you to the Sinclair line. If you can't proceed without talking to him, that might be the appropriate time to address any of your concerns. We're the best fit for you, Max, and we'll do everything we can to prove that to Mr. Sinclair. Can you pass along that message? Josie sounded confident, but somewhat condescending. Please feel free to join us when we talk to Mrs. Sinclair and get down to business. Ms. Simon. She said the name slowly and with emphasis. We'll see, and if you don't mind, my name is Preston. Max is a nickname reserved for my friends, and we're not quite there yet. Thank you again for stopping by. She stood and left through the side door. Leaving wasn't an option, but she needed a minute to tighten her armor back up before facing the rest of the day. What the fuck was that?
Burn. Max is a nickname reserved for my friends. We are not there. I also feel like Vali is the only author in history who can get away with the line, fucked her in the head. I wish I'd said it, but there you go. That's Vali, you guys. Alrighty. So I have a question to start us off. Asking, where did you get the inspiration for this book or for this novella? How did you come up with the idea? What inspired you? Let's start with Jane.
I actually started with an idea of a pub between the worlds, but it didn't sort of, it spun out from there. Different elements came in. As I said, I tend to meld a plot together in my head before I start writing. Elements of the Welsh Mabinogi came in, and the rest of the story just spun itself out from there. But that was the start point.
Cool.
I think it's cute that Jane says parts of the plot have to be hammered out, because you like write the whole book in a plot. I
have the story in my head before I start writing. All the major plot points, how the story, why each step in the, all the major plot points, the minor ones, but I know where everything's going before I start writing.
I feel like it might be a UK thing, because I know that Jane's proposals and Jenny Frame's proposals, they're always like 27 pages. And I'm always like, okay, I have to reserve an entire afternoon to review.
Mine's on a cocktail napkin.
Right. I try to turn in one sentence and she never goes for that.
I always get lots of questions. So.
All right, we have a question from Joni for Dena. In your reading, your character was counting lampposts. Is this character on the spectrum? Does she have some kind of compulsive disorder? And how did you make that choice? Did the character come to you slowly, or develop as you wrote her?
Okay, I don't recall her counting lampposts. They did go to a lamppost, and they did.
I think that might have been mine.
That's
you don't know what you mean.
Oh, okay. Jen.
Yeah, I think that's Shelley. Shelley counts. You know, yeah. When so Shelley kind of popped fully formed into my mind when I started thinking about this book, and I intended Shelley to have all of my characters have you know, these kinds of things, anxiety, depression. I tend to write a lot about that, and so yeah, she has OCD tendencies. And I intended for that to be so, yes.
Okay, cool. Ellie Valley, where did you get the inspiration for your novella?
I went to Nashville a couple years ago to the, when they had the big eclipse. It was, Nashville was one of the places that you could see it. So one afternoon, I drove myself down to the Jack Daniels location. So no matter where you buy a bottle of Jack Daniels, it's made right there in Lynchburg, Tennessee. And they give you a tour, and for a mere $5 more, you get a tasting tour, which is awesome. Like,
The way to do it.
totally awesome. Because it's good, because sometimes you want to buy a bottle of liquor, but you don't want to buy it, then you think like, oh, this sucks. So this is a good way to taste it without actually having to buy the whole thing. So while I was there, I actually got the idea for 2 stories. So the Distiller was one, and then Face of Music was the other. So that's
Cool.
where I got it.
Alrighty. Dena, where did you get inspiration for your book, Kiss Me Every Day?
You know, I've tried to figure that out. Somebody's asked me that before, and I don't know if I was watching a movie or I saw something, and I just all of a sudden I thought, well, what would happen if you could just change your life and go back and change it? And I thought, what a cool idea that would be. Now, pulling it off was really more difficult than I thought, but part of the inspiration for Wynn is the IT stuff. I work in IT, and she's a cutthroat, you know, IT person. So that came from that. I've seen a little bit of that, but
Okay, cool. Carsen Tate, where do you get your inspiration?
Well, the runaway bride story has always fascinated me because, you know, being scared of commitment is a common trope. But also, you know, like what would make you get all the way so close within a week of your wedding or the day of your wedding and then decide to ditch it all, you know? So high stakes, just seemed like fun, but like Dena, it was a lot harder to pull off than it was a great idea, but it was harder to pull off. You know, you want to make your character likable and not someone who would ditch someone at the altar. It was a challenge.
Sure. All right, we have a question for Jen from Sarah Kennard, which I feel like you may know Sarah quite well.
I know she.
The question is,
bit,
are
yeah.
characters based off of real people?
So I don't feel like I can answer that question about Shelley without a fair amount of libel or something. So I can just tell you that I'm overly preoccupied with politics in general. And I happened to see a certain public figure one day on TV, and I was like, oh my God, you're gay. So this explains so much stuff and what would happen, right, if I wrote a book about somebody a lot like you, right, if she actually came out. So, again, I don't want to be anywhere near libel. I know there's some attorneys here who would probably advise me to be careful, but yeah, so it kind of popped into my head, and that's where it all started from.
I feel like that's a better answer, though, because now we all want to know.
I know.
Who's gay?
I'll tell you offline when it's not being recorded, right, and posted on YouTube. Who inspired it?
All right, so I feel like that's a good question for everybody. How did you develop your characters? Are you inspired by real people, you know, little bits and pieces of different people? How do you do your character development? Dena Blake.
I kind of just start with an outline of the character, but some of it I do pull from my daily life, people I know, the quirks especially. some of the funny things they say, because some of that stuff you just can't make up. And so I kind of pull from people, definitely people I know, people I work with, friends, but I won't name any names. So
Protect the innocent.
Yeah.
Carsen, how about you?
I do a lot of eavesdropping. So if you're having a conversation around me, you should probably be careful. No,
or not. I mean,
the pandemic has really ruined my eavesdropping because like it's just me in this room. No, but seriously, you know, I think all the characters are amalgamations of experiences I've had with other people out in the world, and you know, you just kind of think about the traits you want someone to have, and then throw them in a situation and try and make them genuine to that situation and the way they react and move about the world and interact with other people. But it's, you know, I'm always in control of the characters, and what they do, but I don't always know their path when I start. So it's fun to discover that along the way.
Look, somebody wants to buy a t-shirt.
Yeah, I was just, we have a comment from Anonymous. I believe you should interpret this as take your t-shirt off and give it to me.
Yeah, no.
No? Okay. Sorry, Anonymous. Not today.
Not today.
Jen, how about you? How do you develop your characters? Where do you get your inspiration for them?
You know, obviously, television. I like to eavesdrop too, right? And I usually start out with a really vague indication of who somebody is, a few key character traits as I start writing, and then see how the character kind of expands over time. I'm not much of a plotter. You know, I don't go in with a lot of detail.
Cool.
Yeah.
That's a very kind of natural, you know, evolving over the course of the book.
Right.
Approach to do it. Cool.
Yeah,
Jane?
you know, like in the, oh, I'm so sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Go.
No, you're fine.
I was going to say, when I first started writing the book, there was a point actually where my other main character, Rand, I thought, I don't like her very much. I need to do a little bit of work, right? To make her a little bit more likable, because I'm not liking her a whole lot. She surprised me. Yeah.
Jane, how about you? Where do you get your characters from?
Basically, some sort of stuff, pretty much starting with plot. I think the characters know what sort of person would do this. I sort of know what they need to do for the plot. And if I think that no real human being would ever do that, I need to go away and change the plot. But I will be feeding in elements. I'll give them the backstory for any quirks or anything else they need. I will say the only one time I've ever consciously based a character on somebody I really knew was one of the characters in Rangers at Road's End, who I based on the class bully when I was like 14, who picked on me quite a bit, and I sort of made her like 20 years older, gave her some very bad management traits, promoted her to a position she wasn't really suited for, and I had so much fun knowing that halfway through the back book she was going to end up with a dagger in her back.
Right. Working out your issues in fiction there. Fiction as revenge. I feel like that should be our next novella collection, Revenge.
Revenge fiction.
Allie Valley, where do you get your inspiration for your characters?
Well, I live in the South, so I meet quite a few interesting characters along the way. With all the Zooming I've been doing lately, this should be a new book pretty soon. I've noticed more people's nostrils than anything else in the last couple of weeks. No, I'm kind of like Carsen. I like to just observe people. I like to write actually at the mall. That's kind of been a bad situation now with Corona, but you look around and you find interesting characters, and usually they'll make it into like a secondary character in the book. So that's why some of the secondary characters are so kind of a little wacky. But for actually the Kane Casey book is it's based on a true character who I met a long time ago, and so they have to have the characteristics of loyalty, family, that kind of thing. So, but usually just observing human nature and then making sure that they have the characteristics that make the story work.
Cool. Alrighty. Jensen, what's your dog's name?
This is Blue.
Blue,
Tiny mighty princess. About 4.5 pounds of fury. She wanted up on my lap, and she's the boss, so I do what she says.
Here ya. All right. We have a question for Jean Copeland. Is there a story that you're dying to write but haven't yet? So Jen, why don't you start? Story that you're dying to write but haven't yet.
I do. I have a story that's been stuck in my head for a while about 2 parallel time periods. People living completely different lives that end up at a certain point, at the same point. It's absolutely the story I want to write, but I want it to be awesome. So, I'm taking my time.
Cool. That sounds great.
Yeah.
Dena, how about you? Story you want to write but haven't yet?
I want to write a prequel to A Country Girl's Heart. Okay. I've written some of that and laid it out a little bit, but I just haven't gotten into it. So I'd have to get really back into the characters again. So
yeah. Cool.
Yeah.
All right. I feel this is a strange question for Allie Valley, who's written like almost as many books as Radcliffe. Is there one that you want to write but haven't yet, Allie?
You should know the answer to this. You won't let me do it.
True. You can throw me under the bus. I'll let you.
No, well, I'm too lazy to write a historical novel, but I figured if I could go back and forth. No, I wanted to write one of the, like the person that started the Casey family. That's one. And then, I don't know, there's still quite a few ideas up there, thank God. It's either that or I need medication. One of the two.
All right, you guys, you can all cast your vote if Allie Valley should write the history of the Casey family. Send me an email. It may happen. Jane, a story you want to write but haven't yet?
Well, like Dena, there's a story that I've made a start on. It's a story I really want to write. Largely inspired by the Roman invasion of Britain. The great thing about writing it as a fantasy is I can change any facts that don't kind of fit in with it and set the start the way I want them. I started writing it and I got about a third of the way in and realised that something was wrong. So I went off and wrote Silver Ravens instead. I really want to get back to it. I like the fact that my 2 main characters in it, one of them is pretty much amoral, opportunistic, but actually pretty much on the side of right inadvertently, and the other one's very moral, upstanding, strong sense of honour, and is probably mostly on the side of wrong through to the social background, and playing with those 2 characters and the story. So I really want to get back to that once I finish all my quarantine hobbies, like the garden.
Totally, that sounds awesome. Carsen, you're kind of in the same boat as Allie here with so many books behind you. Anything that you haven't written yet?
Yeah, so I'm a huge Veronica Mars fan.
Yes.
And so I'd love to do a series that's the lesbian Veronica Mars.
That'd be awesome.
Are you going to do like the Veronica Mars TV show or Veronica Mars as a movie like 10 years later?
Like maybe a mixture of, I mean, to me, the movie is just a long episode.
That's true. Fair enough.
I've watched it like 1,000 times, so.
I mean,
the whole thing.
She's cute, so I don't blame you. All right, we have 2 minutes left. So I have one last question for everybody. What are you reading right now? What book would you recommend to all our lovely attendees here? There are over 70 people here listening to you guys live. Give us a book that you would recommend. Allie.
Like I said, I just finished Jenny Frame's, I forget the name. What's her new one?
Oh, God.
The Duchess. Something about the Duchess.
Oh, The Duchess and the Dreamer.
Yes, that one. Yeah.
Yes.
That one was actually very good.
Awesome.
And
Thanks.
of course, all the stories in this one.
Which she's also read. The third of its hers.
Yeah.
Jane, how about you? A book you would recommend?
The one I would want to recommend is Carrie Hunter and No Good Reason, which is the first of her Dark Peaks trilogy. And as an audio book, we had the audio, and on a couple of long car journeys, it made the journey just fly. So if you're into audiobooks, I can totally recommend it. And if you really get the first one and you like it, there's 2 more that you can follow up with.
Always a bonus.
Yeah. Just so everyone knows, if you're into audiobooks, you can just type Bold Strokes books into the Audible search bar, and it should bring up a whole bunch of our books. Carsen, a book you would recommend?
Right now I'm reading Waiting for You by Elle Spencer. It's a very funny, very heartwarming tale, and it's a twist on the regular contemporary romance. I'm really enjoying it.
Good. Yeah, that one's also very good.
I remember that proposal. I remember she's like, I want to write this book, and I was like, what?
I know. It's so well done. So well done.
It's definitely a twist in that one. Jen, how about you? A book you would recommend?
Recently I read Georgia Beer's The Do-Over, and it was just awesome. It was like reading it was like drinking hot chocolate, So definitely recommend it.
Yeah, and a pretty heavy topic for Georgia too.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a good one.
That's great.
Dena, a book you would recommend?
I've started What the Heart Remembers Most by M. Ulrich, and it's an amnesia story, and those kind of always intrigue me. So that's what I'm working on right now. Just reading through it. I haven't really gotten too far into it because I've been working on the deadline. We all know that, right? We all know about that.
All right. Well, thank you all so much for being here, for being our first BSB preview ever. We will be doing these every month to give everyone a sneak peek of our July releases. We have another panel happening in 10 minutes. You can still register if you want to. So hop over to the Bold Strokes Books website, and the registration link is on the homepage. If you want to register for the one that starts at 6 p.m. Eastern Time. And the links for all these guys' books are still in the chat roll, along with a special message just for our live attendees. So thank you so much. Thanks for being here, guys.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.